Hello, my favorite Religion 122 students. This is Brother Smith. Uh, we are going to have an online lecture today for Monday, September 26th. I apologize, I can't be in class today, so this will have to do. I would, hopefully it's a good thing. Hopefully you needed some extra time, or you wanted to have class while you did the dishes, or while you cleaned your room, or while you slept, or whatever you want to do. All right, let's get started, and then we'll be back in class together on Wednesday. Okay, I should be able to share my screen with you, and then you should be able to see the slides and me. I hope this is working. Okay, I only have one announcement. That's tomorrow, the blind date ball. I honestly don't know if there's still room, but pause the video, scan the QR code, find someone to go with, because you need to go out and do things, and you'll love it. You'll have a good time. Okay, let's talk what we're gonna do when we have an exam coming up in a couple of weeks. So let's see, from Grant Hardy's article, we talked about, whoops, trying to move this bar that's in the way here, trying to move it. Okay. So I had you read that Grant Hardy article. I won't have you memorize the whole thing, but I might do a fill in the blank here from Hardy's article. In Mormon's eyes, blank and blank are inseparable. In Mormon's eyes, blank and blank are inseparable. He says Mormon is not free to simply create stories. He is constrained by the facts of history, but through his editing, he often highlights certain features or encourages his readers to see events in a particular light. So as you're reading like the war chapters, you're going, okay, Mormon, what are you wanting me to see here? And what do you want me to learn about God? Because history and to him and theology, God, are inseparable. And so you can learn about God through studying Nephite history, according to Mormon. Okay, so I might ask you that question. I might ask you, who are the three major antagonists of the war chapters? Can you get that right without looking? Okay, I won't look. Zarahemnah, Malachi, and Amram. How did I do? I got 100%. So good. Okay, so you got to be able to do that same thing. Who are the three major antagonists of the war chapters? Okay, so the first one we studied is 43 and 44, and that's Zarahemnah. And we talked about how he uses former Nephites as leaders because they have a more murderous disposition than that of the Lamanites. So I might ask you, according to Mormon, why does Zarahemnah use former Nephites as leaders when he goes to battle the Nephites? Something like that. And then we talked about how Captain Moroni, if you remember, went to seek advice from Alma, and he sent his own spies, and then sought advice from Alma. Like, he did what he could, but then he also went to the prophet for counsel and advice, which is a beautiful thing for coming from someone like Captain Moroni, who seems to know so much about war. This idea that he's going to be humble enough to go and get advice from the prophet is something we can all try to emulate and remember. Okay, our next antagonist is Malachi, and we started talking about him. We didn't get all the way through. So Malachi wants to become a king. It doesn't matter what king of what. He just wants to be a king. And he almost gets his way, except for where the title of liberty is created by Moroni, and he is forced to flee. And Mormon says, thus we can see the wickedness one wicked man can cause. We see the wickedness one very wicked man can cause. So I might ask you on the exam, like, when Moroni says we see the wickedness one very wicked man can cause, who's he talking about? And you would say he's talking about Malachi, and he's setting him up, right, to be a satanic figure. And you can see throughout, and we'll talk about it more today, that he wants you to see Malachi as this, right? He's shaping history. He's shaping history because for him, history and theology are inseparable, remember? So he's going to shape this history to set up Malachi as the satanic figure and Captain Moroni as this Christ-like figure. And I'm going to show you some of those. Okay. The title Liberty, what is it? It's a reminder of covenants. It's a reminder of priorities. It's so do you have any, we didn't get to talk about this in class last time. Do you have any titles of liberty around you? Right? Reminders of your covenants, reminders of your priorities. Do you have a picture of your family where you see it every day? Do you have a CTR ring? Do you have those of you who wear garments, right? You know that they're a reminder of the covenants you've made. Wedding rings can be reminders of covenants and priorities. Get some titles of liberty up, whatever they look like, a picture of the temple up in your apartment, whatever, whatever for you would be a reminder of your covenants and your priorities. Captain Moroni talks about a piece of Joseph of Egypt's coat that doesn't decay. That story is not found in the Bible, but it is found in a 10th century Muslim scholarship. I think I showed you this quote from Nibley. This is a test no forgery could pass. How is Joseph Smith finding a story that's not in the Bible, but is recorded in 10th century Muslim scholarship that isn't, even discovered until much later. So, yeah. Anyway, Joseph Smith's the world's greatest guesser. So then we talked about Lahontai. Lahontai is this Lamanite who he is determined with a fixed resolution. Oh, I got those backwards. He is fixed in his mind with a determined resolution. He is not going to unite with the Malachi and fight Nephites. He's like, no. So he goes on top of this mountain. He won't come down. So Malachi gets him to come off the mountain just a little bit and then poisons him by degrees. Right. You can see what Mormon is trying to do here. He's trying to teach you about Satan by using this history lesson. And eventually Malachi kills the king of the Lamanites in order to make himself king of the Lamanites and all the dissenters. So I might ask you, according to Hugh Nibley, what was the test no forgery could pass? Or what story did we tie that to? And that's the Joseph of Egypt's coat, a piece of it not decaying that Captain Moroni talks about. So there's another question for you. I think I've given you 4, 5, 6 questions so far. What was when Malachi wanted to become king of the Nephites? What stopped him? And that's Moroni and the title Liberty. Okay. Who did Mormon set up to be the satanic figure in the war chapters? And you're going to say Malachi. So I think that's like 7 or 8 questions. Make sure that you review these review slides. You could even pause the video right now, go through it, make some questions off of it. You could even pause the video right now, go back through all of our review slides if you have a few minutes, and just review them, right? And you're much more likely to do well on the exam. Okay, let's move forward. Let's talk about more Captain Moroni. So now Malachi is king over the Lamanites, and this is bad. He's got a ton of power, and now you've got Captain Moroni, this description set up of him, and watch him become this Christ-like figure. Moroni was a strong and mighty man. He was a man of perfect understanding. Nobody has perfect understanding. So who is Moroni really talking about here? Right. He's talking about Jesus. He was a man that did not delight in bloodshed. Does that sound like Jesus? A man whose soul did joy in the freedom, the liberty and the freedom of his country and his brethren from bondage and slavery. That's Jesus right there on a different level. He loves agency and wants to free people from any sort of addiction. A man whose heart did swell in thanksgiving to his God. That's throughout the entire New Testament is Jesus praising the Father, right? For the many privileges and blessings which he bestowed upon his people, a man who did labor exceedingly for the welfare and the safety of his people. Again, Christ-like figure. A man who was firm in the faith of Christ. I bet Christ was firm in his faith in himself. And he had sworn with an oath, right? Here am I, send me, to defend his people, his rights, and his country and his religion, even to the loss of his blood. That reminds you of Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane. Yea, verily I say unto you, if all men had a word, never would have been like unto Jesus, the very powers of hell would be shaken forever. Isn't that true? The devil would have no power over the hearts of the children of men. And then he lists these other great people. So you can see he's setting him up as this Malachi as the satanic figure and Jesus as this Christ-like figure, and we're going to pit them against each other, right? Who's going to win? Is Christ going to win in the end, or is Satan going to win in the end? Captain Moroni or Malachi? What is going to happen? All right. Oh, I found this little chart that I think you'd like. You can see that he sets them up as he pits them, right, with the same language. A strong and mighty man, a large and strong man, appointed by the voice of the people and the judges, that's Captain Moroni, becomes king through flattery, dissension, fraud, unifies his people, and he causes dissension among his people, loves liberty and freedom, seeks to destroy liberty, recognizes the Lord's hand, prays for his people, firm in the faith of Christ, right? Fought against the prophets, fought against any preachings from the church, sought to destroy the church. He did not delight in bloodshed. He was willing to have his own blood spilled for his people. On the other side, he did not care for the blood of his people. He wouldn't go himself to battle. He didn't care about slaying or massacring Nephites. And then we just talked about this bottom one. He had sworn with an oath to defend his rights and his people and his country and his religion, leading them to make covenants, right? That's just like Christ leading. His life makes us want to make covenants. And Malachi has his chief captains take an oath that they would destroy the city of the people of Noah, or they themselves would die. So again, if you don't... if you're reading quick, you don't pick up that he's doing this kind of back and forth Mormon, kind of an artist in his writing, isn't he? Okay, so let's look at one way that Captain Moroni is a Christ-like figure. He talks about that the first thing the satanic figure, Malachi, does is he attacks the city of Ammonihah. Why? Because it would have hitherto been the weakest city in the Nephite territories. Behold, I say unto you, the city of Ammonihah had been rebuilt. I say unto you that it was in part rebuilt, and because the Lamanites had destroyed it once because of the iniquity of the people, they supposed that it would become an easy prey for them again. Ooh, how great was their disappointment. For the Nephites had dug up a ridge of earth around it. It was so high the Lamanites couldn't get anything over. So the only way in was a single place of entrance. Their uttermost astonishment, the people were prepared for them in a manner which had never been known among the children of Lehi. They were prepared for battle. So they went to the first, what they thought was the weakest city in Alma 49, right? To what they thought was going to be an easy target for them. In fact, an easy prey, right, for them. And it had been rebuilt. And so they go to the second weakest place, which is the city of Noah. This is the one where we talked about he covenanted, he made his chief captains, Malachi did take an oath that they would destroy the city. But behold, to their astonishment, the city of Noah, which had hitherto been a weak place, had now, by the means of Moroni, become strong, even to exceed the strength of the city of Ammonihah. So their two greatest weaknesses have now become strengths. Do you see the message from Moroni here, or sorry, from Mormon here? Did you pick up on the message? I'm hoping you thought of a verse in the book of Ether. If you haven't, that's okay. You will from now on. Ether 12 says, if men come unto me, this is Christ speaking, I will show unto them their weakness. I give unto men weakness that they may be humble, and my grace is sufficient. Like I have the power for all men and women, right? All mankind. If they humble themselves before me and have faith in me, I will make weak things become strong. So think of your weaknesses that you have, and you want them to be made strong. It's by the means of Moroni, who is, he's our Christ-like figure, right? So if you want your weaknesses to become your strengths, you go to the Savior, and he can do it. He says, my grace is sufficient. Like I can do this. I can make your weaknesses become your strengths. All right, let's look at something Captain Moroni does. If you saw this theme, as I was reading, I was just kind of marking certain words over and over, and one of them was prepare. While Malachi was busy becoming king of the Lamanites, Moroni wasn't sitting back doing nothing. right? He was preparing the minds of the people first to support their liberty. This is on the far left column, their liberty, their lands, their wives, their children, their peace, right? He is like preparing first their minds. And then what's the second thing he's preparing is their places of security. That's Alma 49, verse 5. He had been preparing the whole time for, building up these cities. He was preparing for war the entire time. Alma 50, verse 5, they were prepared that they could cast stones from the top according to the pleasure and strength and slay them who would attempt to approach the walls. Moroni did prepare, verse 6, their strongholds against the coming of their enemies. This is over on the far right-hand column, 51:22. Behold, it came to pass while Moroni was thus breaking down the wars and contentions among his own people and subjecting them to peace and civilization. We're going to talk about that in a second. And making regulations to prepare for war. So in Moroni's mind, if things are down, like if there's some downtime, what do? You prepare, right? You constantly prepare. Now let's think of it in our ways. How is the Savior asking us when things are maybe a smoother time of life? How has he asked us to prepare, right? What are we preparing for? I'll give you an example. Back in December of 2020, my brother passed away. And then in January of 21, one of my best friends passed away. And then in March of 21, my dad passed away. So in 90 days, I lost 3 people that I was very close to. And man, I don't know if I was prepared for that, but because I had studied the gospel so much and studied about trials and difficulties and the fall and why we came here, I was able to make it. I was able to make it through, because I don't think when those things happen, what would President Monson say? When the time for performance is here, the time for preparation is past, right? It was time to perform, and it was rough. But I think because of previous study that I had done and previous conversion that I had done when things weren't difficult, I was able to make it through, or I am currently able to make it through. Like in chapter 52, verse 6, he kept his men round about as if making preparations for war. He truly was preparing to defend himself against them, casting up walls round about, preparing places of resort. He kept thus preparing for war. And then Alma 53 says the same thing, but he did employ his men in preparing for war. So there can be practical lessons in this, by the way. They don't have to be huge trials that come your way. It can be, for example, towards the end of the semester, more things become due, right? As the semester continues, you get more projects that are due, more papers that are due, more tests that you're going to have. And maybe right now it's not so tough. So what are you doing to prepare for the end of the semester? Are you already getting started on some of those things so they don't take you by surprise when the day actually comes, right? It could be you're preparing for marriage, right? Even though some of you're not married yet, you're preparing yourself, your mind, for marriage. You are preparing for a mission, some of you, because the day is coming. Some of you have mission calls and the day is coming. So you are taking time to prepare. It's a great principle. And it's one that I think if you read carefully enough, you can see Mormon trying to give us this theme. Oh, by the way, speaking of the cities that they had prepared, I wanted to read to you a description of a Spanish explorer in 1525. This is how he describes one of the cities he finds. He said, "There is only one level entrance, the whole town being surrounded by a deep moat, behind which is a wooden palisade as high as a man's breast. Behind this palisade lies a wall of very heavy boards, some 12 feet tall, with embrasures through which to shoot their arrows. The lookout posts rise another 8 feet above the wall, which likewise has large towers with many stones to hurl down upon the enemy. Indeed, it was so well planned with regard to the manner of weapons they used, they could not be better defended." Interesting, right? 1525. He has very similar descriptions to the cities that Moroni builds. Okay. And I just want to throw one verse at you out in the middle of nowhere, because this one caught me by surprise. Alma 50, verse 23. In the middle of the war, but behold, there was never a happier time among the people of Nephi since the days of Nephi himself. So all the way back through King Benjamin and Alma and Ammon and all the way back to Lehi. Then in the days of Moroni, yeah, even at this time in the 21st year of the reign of the judges. Interesting, right? That in the middle of a war, they're seeing happy times. Why? Well, they've got this Christ-like figure who is defending them, having them make covenants and promises, preparing them. You can see how if you were to place this with Christ, right? Behold, there was never a happier time among the people of Nephi since the days of Nephi than in the days of Christ, right? That you won't be happier anywhere else in your entire life from the day you were born to today than the days you are close to Christ. Okay. Let's keep going. I wanted to show you another theme that I saw. So preparation is one theme. I want to show you another theme. I saw Mormon using these same words over and over: dissensions and contentions. Can I show you them? Dissensions and contentions. If you have your scriptures, you can just turn to this and just kind of read along. This is Alma 45:21. Watch him use this language and see if you can pick up on what Mormon is trying to teach. Remember, for him, theology and history are inseparable. So what do we learn about God and ourselves and our relationship to God from history? Okay, this is Alma 45:21. For behold, because of their wars, this is the Nephites, Nephites' wars with the Lamanites, and the many little dissensions and disturbances which would have been among the people, it became expedient that the word of God should be declared among them, yea, that a regulation should be made throughout the church. So Helaman goes about trying to watch out for these little dissensions and disagreements. That's not what we call it. Dissensions and disturbances. Verse 23, now it came to pass that after Helaman and his brethren had appointed priests and teachers over the churches, there arose a dissension among them. They would not give heed to the words of Helaman and his brethren. Okay, let's go to 46:6. And thus they were led away by Malachi to dissensions, notwithstanding the preaching of Helaman and his brethren. So it's getting worse and worse. It was little, right? It was a little dissension and disturbance, and now it's flat out rejection of prophets. Led away by Malachi to dissensions, notwithstanding the preaching of Helaman and his brethren, notwithstanding their great care over the church, for they were high priests over the church. Okay, go to verse 11. Now it came to pass when Moroni, who was the chief commander of these armies, Jesus, had heard of these dissensions, he was angry with Malachi, you think? So I've noticed in the New Testament that the one thing Jesus prays for the most, especially in John 17, is unity. Right? He says, "If you, I pray that they'll be one as I and the Father are one." That's as one as you get, right? And he says, I pray that they'll be one. He tells the people in Doctrine and Covenants, if you're not one, you are not mine. He's going to tell us, we're going to come into this part in 3 Nephi chapter 11, where he says contention is of the devil, right? So you can see he's angry with Malachi because of the dissensions. Go to verse 28. Now it came to pass that when Moroni had said these words, he went forth and he sent forth all the parts of the land where there were dissensions. So he goes straight to the dissensions and gathered together all the people who were desirous to maintain the liberty to stand against Malachi, Satan, and those who had dissented, who were called Amalekites. So he goes straight to the heart of it. Interesting, right? That Christ goes straight there. I remember President Nelson did that same thing, didn't he? In the last general conference, he talked spiritual momentum. And one of the things he says gives you spiritual momentum is ending contention, ending these kind of dissensions in your life. Okay, let's go to Alma 47, 35 and 36. It came to pass that Malachi sought favor of the queen. So this is when Malachi uses all this fraud to become the king of the Lamanites. And he declares himself king over all the Lamanites and all the dissenters of the Nephites. Now, verse 36, listen to Mormon talk here. Now, these dissenters had the same instruction and the same information as the Nephites. It's the exact same. right? They had the same scripture, same everything. Yea, having been instructed in the same knowledge of the Lord, nevertheless, listen to Mormon talk here. It is strange to relate. Isn't that an interesting phrase from Mormon? It's odd. He's sitting there writing. He's like, this is such a strange thing to realize that they had the exact same instructions from the Lord. But not long after their dissensions, they became more hardened and impenitent, more wild, wicked, and ferocious than the Lamanites, drinking in with the traditions of the Lamanites, giving way to indolence and all manner of lasciviousness, entirely forgetting the Lord their God. That goes along with one of Mormon's themes that we talked about last time. Remember from Alma chapter 24, thus we see, thus we can plainly discern. I think he says that when people have the Spirit of God, this is Alma 24:30, thus we can plainly discern that when a people have once been enlightened by the Spirit of God, having had a great knowledge of things pertaining to righteousness and then fallen away, they become more hardened, and their state becomes worse than had they never known these things. It is, and then over to Alma 47:36. It is strange to relate that not long after their dissensions, they became more hardened and impenitent. Okay, let's go over to chapter 48, verse 24. This is Moroni's people. Nevertheless, they could not suffer to lay down their lives, their wives, their children, to be massacred. That's a nice way to say massacred by the barbarous cruelty of those who had once been their brethren and had dissented from their church and had left them and gone to destroy them by joining the Lamanites. Okay, now we're going to be in chapter 50, verse 21. We're just going straight down the line of scriptures here. Now, this is Mormon talking again, and every time Nephi is going, or not Nephi, Moroni is going out to fight Lamanites, there's some sort of problem in his own land. The Nephites are having some sort of battle among themselves. And Mormon makes this comment. He said that now we see these promises have been verified from the people of Nephi. He talks about a promise that was made to Lehi in the previous verses. For it has been their quarrelings and their contentions, yea, their murderings and their plunderings, their idolatry, their whoredoms, their abominations, which were among themselves, which brought upon them their wars and their destructions. This seems to be what he's getting at here, is that if it weren't for the little disturbances and contentions that grew and grew and grew among themselves, they wouldn't have had these major wars and problems and lost so much ground to Malachi, right, to Satan. If they hadn't have been the contention among themselves, Malachi couldn't have gained any ground over them. But Moroni is so busy trying to calm and stop these disturbances and dissensions that he doesn't have time to focus on. He doesn't have time to focus on Malachi. Have we done 26 yet? 50, 26. Oh, this is the Morianton one. Right? The Morianton's the same thing. A warm contention comes from the people of Morianton. And these are Nephites who, again, are going to slip away and over and become Nephites. And this is where Mormon says they're so stubborn. That's verse 35. They are so stubborn. And Moroni has to go and take care of that problem within his own people. He can't focus on Malachi. And then 51 is where I actually started picking up on this message. And then I went backwards and started looking for it because look how many verses in 51 has something like this. So in 51, the kingmen now want to put away Pahoran because Pahoran's the chief judge. They want to go back to having kings. So they have this vote and they don't like the vote. So nevertheless, they did not long maintain a peace in the land, and there began to be a contention. This is verse 2, among the people about the chief judge Pahoran. And go over to verse 7. Came to pass that this matter of their contention was settled by the voice of the people, but they don't like that. So they go after. They were going to just override the vote, right? They didn't care. Came to pass the voice of the people did, this is verse 7, came in favor of the freemen So opposite of the kingmen, the people who want to go back to kings. And Pahoran retained the judgment seat, which caused much rejoicing among the brethren of Pahoran and also many of the people of liberty who had put the kingmen to silence. Thus they durst not oppose, but were obliged to maintain the cause of freedom. Now, these who were in favor of the kings they thought they were of high birth. Some people have thought that these were the original Mulekites. Do you remember way back, those of you who remember the first half of the Book of Mormon, when King Mosiah finds the people of Zarahemla? Do you remember? That's in the Book of Omni. He finds a group of people called the Mulekites. And who are they descendants of? Mulek, who is the son of Zedekiah. Who's Zedekiah? King of Judah. So there's some people who believe these chapter 151 verse 8, these kingmen are Mulekites. Maybe so. But look at Mormon's commentary on it, verse 9. This is where you pick up on, again, his similar message he's already given us. But behold, this was a critical time for these contentions to be among the people of Nephi, because Malachi was stirring up the hearts of the Lamanites against the Nephites, right? And he was gathering soldiers from all parts of the land and arming them. And he had sworn to drink the blood of Moroni. Now, Mormon's like, we shall see that promise which he made was rash. Yeah, you think? I think drinking someone's blood would probably give you a rash. But he's not going to give him so much that he's like, oh man, Malachi is going to win. But there is a part of this where he's like, Malachi gains so much ground because the people have so many contentions among them. See, Malachi is coming down. Look at verse 12. Even Malachi himself did come down at the head of the Lamanites, and it was the same time that they had begun to settle the affairs of the contentions about the chief judge Pahoran. So they're fighting among themselves. No one's watching for Malachi. Verse 15. So Moroni wants to get rid of this contention and dissension immediately. So he asks the governor for the power, according to the voice of the people, that he can defend the country. If kingmen do not want to defend the country, they'll be put to death. Verse 16, for it was his first care. Isn't interesting, isn't it? His first care to put an end to such contentions and dissensions among his people. For behold, look at Mormon, he's saying, this had been hitherto a cause of all their destruction. Right? So the dissenters are either agree to fight for the kingdom or with Moroni, or they are killed in a separate battle. These are Nephites fighting against Nephites. 4,000, he says, are killed in this battle. You go over to 22 and it says, behold, it came to pass while Moroni was thus breaking down the wars and contentions among his own people and subjecting them to peace and civilization. I love that phrase, subjecting them to peace. You will be peaceful, so help me. Subjecting them to peace and civilization and making regulations to prepare for war against the Lamanites. Behold, the Lamanites had come into the land of Moroni, which was in the borders of the seashore. And Malachi in chapter 51 gains city after city after city, which had been fortified by Moroni, and it's so frustrating for Moroni. And the only reason Malachi doesn't get further is because of Teancum, right? Teancum goes in, came to pass that Teancum stole privily into the tent of the king. This is Malachi, sneaks over, put a javelin to his heart, and he caused the death of the king immediately, that he did not awaken his servant. So there we have the end of Malachi, and it comes at the hands of Teancum, and it's not a glorious death by any means. It's quick, and Teancum becomes kind of a favorite character for a lot of people in the war chapters. Okay, one more, 53, 8, and 9. Again, the theme, I think, is coming from Mormon. Now it came to pass that the armies of the Lamanites on the west sea south, while in the absence of Moroni, on account of some intrigue among the Nephites, which caused dissensions among them, had gained some ground over the Nephites. Yea, insomuch they had obtained possession of a number of their cities. And then verse 9, and thus, there's that word kind of thus we see, right? Thus, because of the iniquity among themselves, yea, because of the dissensions and intrigue among themselves, this is Alma 53:9, they were placed in the most dangerous circumstances. So I was hoping you would see this theme from Mormon, which seems to be the only time they lose to a Malachi or any one of these antagonists, the only time they lose is when they're fighting among themselves. That's the only time that the enemy can gain ground. Now think about that for life. The only time that the enemy can gain ground in my life is when I'm fighting, when we're fighting amongst ourselves, or even I'm fighting against myself, right? I'm having an inner battle that the enemy can overpower me. Interesting, right? Okay, so things are looking bad for the Nephites. They have lost most of their cities, and they've had tons of dissensions among themselves. So what are we going to do? Who is going to save the day? Right? And you saw it. You know who it is. Who comes in and saves the day? It's the youth. It's these the sons of the converted anti-Nephi Lehis. It's these young men, and we would say young men and young women today, right? It's these young people who come in and they save the Nephite people from destruction. So what's interesting is when the Nephites were taking in the people of Ammon, these anti-Nephi Lehis, they were saving them. But by so doing, who are they actually saving? They were saving themselves, because later on, these young men come to save the day. And we get this in the series of letters that Helaman sends to Nephi. First, Mormon says they were all young. They were all exceedingly valiant for courage and also strength and activity. The Alma 53:20. This was not all. They were true at all times in whatsoever thing they were entrusted. They were men of truth and soberness. They had been taught to keep the commandments of God and walk uprightly before him. This is the hope of Israel, right? You want to save the church? You want to save the world? This is the type of person you have to be. It was hard. Alma 56, Helaman says they were depressed in body as well as in spirit, for they had fought valiantly by day and toiled by night to maintain their cities. They had suffered afflictions of every kind, and now they were determined to conquer in this place or die. So here's these Nephite adults who are doing their very best to maintain this city, and here comes this group of young people. This little force, which I brought with me, did give them hopes and joy. That's you. That's you right now. You and those younger than you. You're the hope of Israel, right? I don't know if you know that, but I mean, you're not just a Netflix watching human being. You are the hope of Israel. When the battle's on the war is on the line and things look tough, here come the youth to step up. And he says, I've never seen this kind of courage among all the Nephites. My brother Moroni, verse 45, I have never seen this kind of courage. I have called them my sons, and they were all very young. He said, they call me Father. Father, behold, our God is with us. He will not suffer that we should fall. Then let us go forth. We would not slay our brethren if they would let us alone. So let us go. And so he's like, okay, I took them to battle. They had never fought, but they did not fear death. This is Alma 56, verse 47. Because they did think more upon the safety, liberty of their fathers than they did upon their lives, right? They had been taught by their mothers. How many of you have a great mom that if they did not doubt, God would deliver them? We should take a moment, pause the video, shoot a text to your mom, say, Mom, we are studying the stripling warriors today and how they come in and save the Nephites from annihilation to this satanic figure. And I just got to say, I'm grateful for you, Mom. You got to send that text. He said, they rehearsed unto me. This is Alma 56:48. Did you send that text? Alma 56:48. They rehearsed unto me the words of their mothers, saying, we do not doubt. Our mothers knew it. He said, my little band of 2,060 fought most desperately. They were firm before the Lamanites, and they didn't administer death unto all those who opposed them. My goodness. He says, my 2,060 were firm and undaunted. Even when the adults of the army were about to give way, these young people would not give way. They did obey and observe to perform every word of command with exactness, even according to their faith, which was done unto them. And I did remember the words which they had said unto me, that their mothers had taught them. He's like, how did they get this way? It was their mothers who had taught them to be this way, to obey and observe and to perform every word of command with exactness. He said, this is the faith of these of whom I have spoken. They were young, their minds are firm, and they do put their trust in God continually. You guys, that's you. Now, I don't know if Mormon meant to say, oh, this is, the latter days, the youth of the church are going to save it. But you can see it in every way that you bring in hope and joy when you are firm in the faith. Does this describe you very well? This is the faith of whom I have spoken. They're young, their minds are firm, they do put their trust in God continually. They receive many wounds, but they stand fast in the liberty wherewith God has made them free. They're strict to remember the Lord their God from day to day. Does that describe you? They're strict to remember the Lord their God from day to day. They do observe his statutes and his judgments and his commandments continually. Their faith is strong in the prophets, in the prophecies concerning that which is to come. But the prophets, their faith is strong in the prophets. We have a chance this weekend, right, to show that our faith is strong in the prophets. You guys, I hope that you feel the power of this. You are the hope of Israel. You are the stripling warriors of today. And you come in and save the day. Now, what happens? Let's go to chapter 59. On the other end of the battle, where the stripling warriors aren't, they are losing, seriously losing. And here's what Moroni says, or here's what Mormon says. And now, as Moroni has supposed, there should be sent, there were men sent to the city of Nephihah. He thought that there were going to be men sent there to the assistance of the people to maintain that city. And knowing that it was much easier to keep a city from falling into the hands of the Lamanites than to retake it, he supposed that they would easily maintain that city. He's like, oh, they're going to send men over there, right? But no one sent anybody. No one went. Therefore, he retained all his force to maintain those places which he had recovered. And now Moroni saw the city of Nephihah was lost. He was exceedingly sorrowful. And look at this, even Captain Moroni. And he begins to doubt because of the wickedness of the people, right? It's not because of the force, how strong the Lamanites are. He's not scared of the Lamanite forces. He begins to doubt because of the wickedness of the people, whether they really can do this or they're going to fall into the hands of their brethren. He said, this is the case with all the chief captains. They doubted and marveled because of the wickedness of the people, and this because of the success of the Lamanites over them. And it came to pass that Moroni was angry with the government because of their indifference concerning the freedom of their country. Moroni is angry with the government. So he is going to send a letter up to Pahoran and to let him know what he thinks about them not sending anyone to help. Okay. So far in our battle of, let me bring him back up here, in our battle of Christ versus Satan, right? Captain Moroni versus Malachi and Amaron, his brother. Who's going to win? Who's going to win? It's a tough battle. This is a seriously tough battle, and a lot of people are lost. And I think that's one of the reasons it's written the way it is for us to take this seriously, because this isn't a little fight. This isn't a little skirmish where a couple people get wounded. This is a huge war. What is it that Paul says? So we don't fight against. Oh, let's see if I can bring it up. What are we fighting against? We fight for principalities. Right. I'm going to use my library app. We fight against principalities, and there he is. Okay. This is Ephesians 6, verse 12. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. That's the NIV version, King James version. We do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Man, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. I'm just reading a different versions of the Bible. Because your fight, this is the Aramaic Bible, because your fight has not been with flesh and blood, but with principalities and the rulers and the powers of the dark world, and with the wicked spirits which are under heaven. Man, this is our fight, and I hope you take it seriously, because I think that's why Mormon wrote it this way, so we would. All right, my friends, I think that is enough for today. Let me stop the share. Okay, I will see you on Wednesday. To get full attendance, by the way, for your attendance points, you only need to listen to this before you listen and watch this before you report on Sunday. All right. Okay. I'll see you Wednesday. You're great. Bye.